Unit 11 started off pretty interesting. Right away, we're watching a song called You Got Trouble from the musical The Music Man, which was originally set in 1912. To give a little context about the song, it's about a time when in July 1912, a traveling salesman, Professor, with, in quotes, Harold Hill, arrives in the fictional location of River City, Iowa, intrigued by the challenge of swindling the famously stubborn natives of Iowa. Masquerading as a traveling band instructor, Professor Hill plans to con the citizens of River City into paying him to create a boys' marching band, including instruments, uniforms, and music instruction. Once he has collected the money and the instruments and uniforms have arrived, he will hop the train out of town, leaving them without their money or a band. With help from his associate, Marcellus Washburn, who is now living in River City and is the only one who knows Hill's real name, Gregory, Professor Hill incites mass concern among the parents of River City that their young boys are being seduced into a world of sin and vice by the new pool table in town. He convinces them that a boys' marching band is the only way to keep the boys of the town pure and out of trouble, and begins collecting their money. The reason that we're told to listen to this song is because the whole kind of argument that the new pool den is causing a lot of trouble for the boys and seducing them to commit sin is very similar to the idea that we see today that the internet is kind of this horrible place where people, do things they shouldn't and get in troubles for, looking at things they shouldn't and posting things they shouldn't, and that it's just like this big place where there's nothing but trouble. After this, we read another short article by Burnett from 2015. It was a spoof article titled "Toddlers Pose a Serious Risk to Smartphones and Tablets." The article starts off by addressing the idea that the internet and tablets are bad for the brains of children and that they turn them into mush, and then it flips this on its head by saying that, if anything, children are much more of a danger to these tablets than the other way around, considering the way that they kind of don't know how to treat them properly and they get them all dirty and they break them, which is definitely true. I have a younger cousin, and I mean, I've seen other kids do it before where they take these things and they just totally like turn them all crusty and gross, and I've seen it before, and it's true, it is horrible. So I could definitely see like the comical side of this article, and I agree with it. We then watched a lecture video from the professor titled "The Internet and Development," and it starts off by sharing this plethora of facts about children and their development phase and how it relates to different technologies. One such fact is that did you know that children develop their reading skills just as well and sometimes better by using interactive talking books, for example, off their iPads, as by working one on one with an adult tutor and paper copybooks? She does this for a while to emphasize the fact that the internet and different electronic devices can actually be very good at kind of teaching children and giving them new skills and ways to learn, rather than just being this thing that we have to be afraid of because, we consider it like kind of brain melting or bad for kids. Gernsbacher then goes on to describe how a lot of the reasons for why we've never heard of these positive effects of the internet is because people, as we mentioned earlier, have sort of a moral panic about new technologies, and they naturally fear things that are new and kind of considered scary, and that's why a lot of times we don't hear about these positive effects that the internet provides. Instead, we only hear about more of the negative. Anywho, this lecture goes on to address different concerns from different news stations, such as Wired's article asking whether touchscreens are melting your kid's brain, and CNN's op ed asking whether the internet is hurting children. Generally, there's been a sense of caution surrounding tablets, as many feel like they are dangerous for kids, even though there's not a whole lot of hard evidence to really prove this theory. Plenty of positive effects of the internet are shared, such as how, kids can interact and kind of learn through the internet by reading different materials and seeking all different kinds of stimulation and learning about things like colors and shapes and all different interesting sort of, new developments for a child. And that ultimately a lot of the fear that we see surrounding this kind of idea that children should not interact with tablets is built on just kind of general unfounded concerns and aren't based in enough research to actually warrant the sort of moral kind of concern that we currently see. Also, in this assignment, we read a couple of tweets that talk about this sort of fear feedback loop where we see kids start doing something, adults get concerned, people do studies, the press covers only the negative sort of results of these studies, and then this concern grows. And we also see that, a lot of the people who make these stories that kind of talk about the negatives of these like different kind of things that kids interact with are really doing it because they want to profit off of like the anxieties of parents, because they know that these scared parents are going to read and interact with all this material because they're just trying to protect their kids. And at the end of the day, there's money to be made in that if they can get clicks from people, even if it's, these anxious, scared parents. For this assignment, I was tasked with reporting which finding from the lecture video that was done on a positive effect of the internet on development that I appreciate the most and why. And going off this, I decided to share that the positive effect that I wanted to talk about was that children develop their reading skills just as well and sometimes better by using interactive talking books, for example, off their iPads, as they do by working one-on-one with an adult tutor or a paper copy book. I said that I chose this skill because reading is a very crucial skill for all students, and so being able to teach it more effectively is an incredible thing because, it's always going to come back to help you. There's no such thing as being too good of a reader. And the fact that the internet and online resources allow us to better our teaching abilities for these kids is a great thing. And then we were also told to talk about which reason for why these positive effects are not better known that Professor Gernsbacher raised in her lecture, perhaps illustrated by the above tweets, that we also appreciate and why. In responding to this, I said that the reason for why these positive effects are not better known that I appreciate most would have to be because people have a tendency to fear new things, as I mentioned earlier, especially new kinds of technology. People are often uncomfortable when they are introduced to something new and mysterious, especially when it replaces something else that they are more familiar with. It's pretty easy to get attached, to the things that we are familiar with and to be wary of new inventions, but ultimately we do have to learn to accept new things when the time is right, even if it means we have to say goodbye to something that we initially found ourselves to like quite a bit. Ignoring the positive results of the internet would be kind of an ignorant and wrong thing to do, and we should be willing to explore the internet more and share these positive effects and really lean into them rather than being worried about what few, negative effects might also exist. But that was the entirety of Assignment 1 for Unit 11, so now it's time to move on. Assignment 2 has a familiar beginning. We're again talking about the meta-analysis, looking at a definition from Wikipedia. A meta-analysis is a statistical analysis that combines the results of multiple scientific studies. Wikipedia also lists several advantages of using meta-studies. Results can be generalized to a larger population. Hypothesis testing can be applied on summary estimates. The presence of publication bias can be investigated, and there's even more going off of that. After this, we read the abstract of a study by Ferguson et al. In 2022. This was a meta-analysis named Like This Meta-Analysis, Screen Media and Mental Health. What they found was that across studies, evidence suggests that screen media plays little role in mental health concerns, and that overall, as has been the case for previous media such as video games, concerns about screen time and mental health are not based in reliable data, which is a very interesting finding because it kind of contradicts a lot of these fears that people have that too much interaction with online material is a bad thing and that it's inherently just hurting people. But this data suggests otherwise. It suggests that there's no real reason to be afraid of this new technology, which is definitely not like a new idea. We've heard about this a lot in this course, and here it is, popping back up again. After this, we were tasked with better understanding the effect of internet use on adolescent development by reading a series of excerpts and abstracts and readings, all from plenty of different universities and studies. After this, we were told to better understand the history of concerns about other forms of media negatively affecting adolescents by skimming through plenty of different collections of photographs and different studies and, again, different work from universities. And then finally, to better understand the effect of internet use on younger children's development, we again read some articles, some empirical studies, and read some reports. Ultimately, the findings show that adolescent development is not negatively affected by interaction with technology, that we've constantly believed that adolescent development has in the past been negatively affected by new technologies. This could mean anything from the popularization of radio or playing even pinball. And then again, looking at the effect of internet use on younger children's development, there's no real reason to believe that children are being hurt by technology. Instead, it's only been shown to help them in many instances. We were then told to imagine a scenario in which a family friend or a relative who is a parent of either a young child or an adolescent has learned that we are taking a course called Psychological Effect of the Internet. Therefore, this family or friend asks us for scientifically based evidence about whether the internet is rewiring their child's brain, whether the internet is affecting their young child's educational, physical, or mental health, and what the best amount of screen time for their young child is, and whether the parent should be a limiter, enabler, or mentor to their young child's use of the internet. Responding to this fictitious call for help, I tell them that according to the article by UNICEF, recent neuroscience evidence is seen to challenge the notion that the internet is rewiring the brains of youths who engage with the content. There's no real reason to believe that children's brains or adolescents' brains are at any risk of being harmed by moderate use of internet. Still talking about adolescent development, I tell them that the article by Reinhardt showed that internet usage didn't have much of a measurable effect on adolescents' commitment to completing their schoolwork, and that their educational health was not really affected either. Continuing to question 3, I say that the article published by Weinstein explained that adolescents who use technology for a moderate amount of time are not harmed by it, and that some actually saw benefits. The press release that followed up on this article supported this finding even more, showing that moderate amounts of engagement with tech can be good for children. And then finally, I tell them that Samuel's article described whether parents could enable, limit, or guide their children's use of internet. And then I tell them that specifically because their child is an adolescent, I would recommend them to be a mentor to their child, meaning that they sort of guide them through the use of the internet and they tell them about like what it's capable of and what to steer clear of, and that they don't necessarily, just tell them not to use it or not to look at things or what not to do. And they don't just give them complete free rein either. Rather, they sort of tell them about what the different strengths and weaknesses are and where they should be. And the reason for this is because being a mentor is described as being the best way to prepare their child to handle the internet appropriately by the study. Those who use it without guidance or who are limited from using it end up being less well adapted in the long run, and they actually go on to get into more trouble. Ultimately, the findings here would all point to the suggestion that for adolescents, moderate use of the internet can be far from harmful and can actually, in most instances, not have any kind of real effect, but every now and then it can also be seen to have positive effects on their growth. This was everything for assignment number 2, though. For assignment number 3, we are again presented with a list of about 20 abstracts, and we are told to read at least 5 of them for this assignment. A lot of these different abstracts mentioned different kind of elements of internet use. One talks about internet use and well-being of older adults before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. One talks about the association between specific social activities and depression symptoms among older adults. And then another still talks about internet use and well-being in older adults. So after reading my 5 studies and kind of learning about how the internet has effects on different kind of social and health-related elements, I read the abstract of Bengi and Scullin's 2025 article, A Meta-Analysis of Technology Use and Cognitive Aging. This study looks at the first generation of people who have engaged with digital technologies as they are now reaching an age where the risk of dementia is starting to emerge. And what they're trying to determine is that if technological exposure has helped or harmed cognition in these people. What they found was that use of digital technologies was associated with reduced risk of cognitive impairment and reduced time-dependent rates of cognitive decline, showing that moderate use of technologies actually help these people to kind of maintain their cognitive functions. Next, I read through a report from the Pew Research team from 2017 titled Older Adults' Barriers to Adoption and Attitudes Towards Technology. This report presents 5 barriers that older adults face in using digital technology and the internet, and this report also presents 6 positive attitudes that older adults have about digital technology. A lot of these different kind of obstacles for older populations show feelings of kind of hesitation or like feeling like they couldn't understand technology if they tried, just because, like they're old enough now and they feel like they aren't very confident in their ability to kind of pick up new tricks or learn new things. A lot of older adults also talk about how they might have some kind of disability or physical impairment that might make it difficult for them to pick up these new technologies. But the positives of this study also show that once a lot of seniors do get online, that they're able to make the internet a pretty standard part of their daily routine. They're able to use social media to some extent to kind of engage socially with others, and that some seniors are even able to pretty well adapt these technologies as they're like pretty newly coming out, just because they want to try new things and they're still looking to pick stuff up, even though they're in an age group that typically doesn't always like to do this. There's still, always going to be some who do. For this assignment, I was tasked with discussing one of the 5 barriers or one of the 6 positive attitudes that was mentioned in the Pew Research report. And for this assignment, I decided to discuss the positive attitude that 58% of seniors feel that technology has had a mostly positive effect on society. We know that seniors sometimes struggle to efficiently utilize technology, so to see that most do appreciate it is interesting to see. I was also tasked with discussing one of the 5 barriers or one of the 6 positive attitudes mentioned in the Pew Research report by quoting the actual quoting the barrier or positive attitude itself. So that would just again go back to the idea that 58% specifically of seniors do like to, feel like that technology is having a positive effect on society. I was also then tasked with kind of referencing my 5 abstracts that I read to talk about this barrier positive attitude more. So going off this, I said the study by Zhang et al. From 2024 explains that a positive association exists between seniors' use of technology and their mental health. It makes sense that seniors would feel that technology has had a positive effect on people if it positively contributes to their own mental health. If they feel like it works, then it makes sense that they would be more likely to cite that it works. And then in the next study, Gazet et al. 2023 had a similar finding. It was found that seniors who belong to an intergenerational family online community had higher levels of well-being and less feelings of loneliness, and that similarly Umo et al. 2023 reported that seniors who frequently use the internet to message others felt less socially isolated. A possible positive effect of technology that seniors could be referring to could be the ability to contact family members or just other people in general to stay in touch, and really connect with others and, kind of tap into that positive effect on society that they talked about experiencing before. And then Erickson and Johnson, 2011, found that seniors who use the internet more often have higher ratings of self-efficacy or their belief in their own ability to achieve. And in a similar vein, Schloman et al. 2020 reported that seniors who use the internet more describe themselves as feeling more autonomous. In both of these cases, it would seem that the technology of the internet really does help seniors to achieve more of their goals and remain confident in their own abilities. And so it makes sense that they would kind of appreciate this technology and feel that it does really have a positive effect on society. That was me for Unit 11, assignment number 3, though. Assignment number 4 had me reading 4 activities. First, I read Nud's 2012 article, Perfect Match, Brazilian Kids Learn English by Video Chatting with Lonely Elderly Americans. Next, I watched CNA's 2014 video, Speaking Exchange. Then I read Kazemi's 2014 article, 10 Ways to Help Older People Use the Internet. And finally, I watched Boyge's 2018 holiday commercial, which demonstrates sharing technology across the lifespan. All these 4 different pieces of content all focused on the idea of combining, the elderly with technology to sort of give them a chance to kind of interact with other people and interact with their families and just kind of speak their minds and get a chance to really tap back into their communities and just get a chance to really kind of get out of just their life and sort of, grow and kind of have a chance to experience what it's like to communicate with others and to really expand more. Because in later years, I know I've seen firsthand that it can get more lonely. Sometimes you feel like you're kind of stuck in your house or stuck in your room or sometimes just stuck in a chair, So, giving elderly people like a chance like this to kind of branch out and connect with others can definitely be a good way to sort of reduce feelings of loneliness and to give them a chance to kind of just connect with each other and be human again, I guess, in a sense. Next, I spent 1 hour teaching an older adult, this was my Nana, how to do something new using the internet. So this could have been something like working on Facebook or sending a text message. This was another fun assignment. I like this one, but I ended up calling my Nana, and then I actually had her do some work on Instagram. Now, she's used Facebook for a while, so she does kind of have an idea of how social media works, but she never really uses Instagram, and that's usually the platform that I use. So this was kind of a fun chance to get her on there and show her how to look at different posts that people are making and how to leave comments and how to message people and just all that kind of fun stuff that I use Instagram for. Now, my Nana was actually 77 years old. I taught her how to use Instagram, and she was actually able to pick up most of it pretty well, I would say. I was kind of surprised at how much she picked up, considering we didn't talk for very long. But I walked her through, like I said, the process of messaging people, adding friends, looking at posts, leaving comments, liking posts, and more. She did figure out how to add friends and how to message them pretty easily, but she did have a little bit of confusion around how to use the app to like navigate through multiple of the different pages. So like I know they change this around pretty often, but if you want to like get to different parts of the app like messaging, a lot of times it's easiest to just like swipe through it all, and she found that to be kind of confusing. To be fair, I sometimes I find that kind of confusing too, so I can't blame her. But other than that, I would say it went pretty well. I was inspired to teach my grandma how to message people after seeing the article by Nud and watching the video by CNA where the senior citizens actually go to like teach English to Brazilian children by calling them online. I realized that my grandma would probably like to talk with people more and that this could definitely be like a fun new way to do it. You know, having like a new like kind of social avenue where we can like send each other things and text each other. And after reading the Kazemi article, I realized that my grandparents are probably not very well versed in the like open culture of the internet, which is the idea that the internet is kind of like this free, accessible, very like just prevalent thing in society. I mean, the internet, if you think about it, really is everywhere we look nowadays. So, I figured it wouldn't be a bad thing for any of, anyone to be like a little more well versed in like how to navigate it or how to use it. And then I also made sure to snap a picture of her and to post that into my comment. She's in there working on her phone, going through Instagram. But that was everything that I had for assignment number 4. Moving on to assignment number 5, we have another meeting with our chat group this week. We started off by reading up on the digital divide and learning about it. And the definition is that it's the gulf between those who have ready access to computers and the internet and those who do not. We then read the one-page extract of Vic's 2017 article, The Digital Divide, A Quarter of the Nation is Without Broadband. We then read a 2-page extract of Education Superhighways 2017 Annual Report on the State of Broadband Connectivity in America's Public Schools. We read Pew Research Center's 2018 summary, Nearly 1 in 5 teens can't always finish their homework because of the digital divide. We read ROM's 2020 article, It Shouldn't Take a Pandemic, Coronavirus Exposes Internet Inequality Among U.S. Students as Schools Close Their Doors. And then finally, we watched Soul Pancake's 2017 video. If you've never heard of the homework app, this video will shock you. Going into the actual chat, we talked about how the Vic article talks about how those who are living with kind of reduced finances, if they're living at under $20,000 a year, then they have a hard time kind of connecting digitally with things, because they might not have access to, the internet or those different kind of means of communications. They might not have a device that can actually access the internet. And then moving on to Rom's article, we talked about how it made a pretty good point that, when the pandemic came around, a lot of work was done to kind of bring access to these online resources to a lot of different communities just because, people couldn't leave their houses, couldn't talk face to face as much. So it was important to kind of have a way to talk like online to communicate with each other, just because that was only the safe way to do it. But I mean, in the context of like learning and just this digital divide, this article also makes a good point that we shouldn't have waited so long, until a literal pandemic to actually bring comprehensive and affordable internet access to more people. In the modern day and age, like the internet is just such a commonly used tool. It's such a powerful tool that living without it sounds really difficult, and it's hard to imagine that this isn't something that we fought harder to like actually bring to people. The superhighway report was something that we also found to be pretty interesting. One of the specific statistics that we were surprised by was the idea that 11 million students are not connected. It's estimated to like the internet, and that they just go to school without having any kind of access to this, like just this wide array of resources because they can't afford it. There was like another statistic from the Pew Research that said that 1/5 of teens can't do their homework because they have issues with like connection, like just internet connection. And that's crazy to think about because, so many of us, myself included, take that for granted. And it's crazy to think that there are some people where that's their reality, that they just can't access that because they don't have those resources. It really made it clear that for a lot of these students, the only way they can get access to the internet, if they have like a device at all, is to have to travel somewhere where they get access to free internet, like a library. And that's only if they even have, a device in the first place, which many don't, because, they can be a big expense. And then finally, we talked about the Soul Pancake video. And we just talked about how we thought the video did a good job of highlighting the gap between those with internet and those who are like smart enough to do the work and get it done, but they don't have access to the internet. Because even then, when we have smart kids working, and other smart kids working with the internet, we see that this gap is still incredible. Like, it's just such a powerful tool that it's not really fair to compare, people who have it and don't have it, because they're put at such a disadvantage. It's really indescribable. During this chat, we were also told to say what facts surprised us the most, and I said that I was surprised that prior to COVID that there wasn't much being done to bring the internet to all people, and it was only really being given to people that could afford it, because we didn't really see it as something that people kind of needed access to, or it being something that was like kind of, I guess, just a prerequisite to living in the 21st century. But I mean, when you think about it, it really is, because we see it everywhere all the time. It feels like something that more people should have access to, just because it is so like prevalent. It's everywhere. I said that in a sense, though, I was also not super surprised to consider the idea that those who can't afford these resources would be abandoned. On one hand, I think it's wrong and that it shouldn't be changed. I think it's something that we should be changing, because it is so important, bringing these kind of different groups together. But at the end of the day, I don't know if I can say that I'm incredibly surprised, because it is, I mean, it's not a free resource, and it's not something that's considered like something that everyone is entitled to. But I don't know, it feels like to some extent it should be, because it's so just unique and incredible. But I guess it's not wild to me to think that, these companies don't just think to bring it to people who maybe can't afford it or won't pay that much, because I mean, it is a business, and that's bad for the business model to sort of give your resources away like that. And then next we talked about some of the benefits and some of the barriers to K to 12 students having access to high-speed internet in their schools and in their homes. Some of the benefits we talked about were that, having access to that internet is a good way to access resources like related to learning, like class content and different kind of homework problems and different little bits of resources to work with in order to better learn material. And we also talked about how it could be a good way to kind of interact with others and ask questions, and to really just even expand your knowledge beyond the classroom, to go even further. And then when talking about barriers, we said that cost was a big one, as none of this is free, so someone has to pay for this, and it's always going to be hard to find someone who wants to pay for things like that. And then finally, as a group, we came together to brainstorm 3 creative ways to kind of bridge this digital divide. And we talked about like what resources we would need to do this, and where these resources could potentially come from. One idea that we shared was kind of the idea of having like community places that people could go to access these sort of resources. So like places that are specifically kind of dedicated to learning or like studying through the internet and through these like different devices where people can kind of easily tap into them. And we mentioned that, these resources, if they are like a public resource, they could be fundraised for by the community or like a local government, or even by just accepting like donations of technology that people don't want anymore and then recycling them. And there were also some articles that talked about how there are many teachers who actually don't even realize that this digital divide exists and what kind of effects it has on kids. And so I just think that like educating these teachers on these kind of steps that could be taken to help these kids and to catch them up with everyone else could definitely be a good way to kind of give them a chance to grow into their position and really kind of better realize what position their students are in, and give them a chance to kind of work with what they've got, rather than putting them down for maybe turning work in late or not always having the best grades because they struggle to access resources. And teachers already undergo a lot of training naturally, so I think, tacking on more wouldn't be incredibly burdensome. It would just be a matter of reminding them, about the importance of being like open to students' requests and like questions about technology, and being, aware of what kind of things affects them. And then finally, we said that if the problem is bad enough and there are students who don't have access to online resources, that, like physical in-person alternatives, like old school alternatives could be given to students. So like paper packets, or like, maybe like different book readings, or like printouts of online resources. This would be easy ways for students to kind of engage with the material and still have stuff to like read and work with that is kind of just being ripped right from the internet. And this would just be a simple matter of like, paying for the cost of running the printer or something like that. Like, it doesn't have to be something super complicated or difficult. But those were our 3 ideas for bridging the digital divide. And then, with this being the end of the call, we kind of set up our tasks for who did what to get the PDF, the summary, and then the basic details about the meet. And then we found a next time that we could all meet for. That was the end of assignment number 5. Going into assignment number 6, right away we had the course review sheet again. I made sure to fill out the old details, but then Unit 11 starts and it asks us to identify 2 positive effects of internet use on the cognitive, health, or psychological aspects of aging. And I responded by saying that internet use is linked with lower rates of social isolation, as we talked about how, in that elderly population, how a lot of times kind of tapping into the internet can be a good way to sort of interact with other people. And then I also said that the more seniors use online communication tools, the better their executive functioning is. They also self-rate their health as being better, and they are more socially integrated. Next, I was tasked with identifying 2 positive effects of internet use on child development, and I said that moderate use of technology can have positive impacts on the well-being of children, and that children who use technology a moderate amount are described as having more emotional attachment to their parents. I think both of these responses do a good job of highlighting the fact that specifically moderate use has been shown to kind of create positive effects for children in, good positive ways. And then finally, again, working on my final project a little more, writing on my summary, just making sure to kind of plug away at it and put it all together. But then once I had that, and once I had my course review sheet, I put them together for assignment number 6. And with that being said, unit number 11 was done.